Hi there, welcome to BSidesSF. Just to let you know, there will be no Slido today, so we will have live Q&A at the end. If we don't have time during the presentation, you're welcome to meet him at the lobby. Take it off. Take it away.
Test, test, test. All right, there we go. Hey, everyone. Thanks for showing up. Appreciate it. Hope you guys are having a good B-Sides. I know I am. So yeah, let's get started. Hey, everyone. Today I'll be talking about how Twilio's segment proactively protects customer API tokens, secrets, keys, whatever you like to call them. I'm Sal Olivares. I'm a senior software engineer at Twilio's segment on the security features team. And our team is responsible for MFA, SSO, really anything authentication related, login, log out. And I've worked about 1.5 years there. I've worked on both customer facing and internal facing features. And one of my concerns last year has been API token, and early this year has been API token security. Basically, like how do we ensure that our customers' tokens or our customers are informed and protected in the event that a segment API token leaks? So I think we can all agree that nothing good ever comes from committing an API token to a Git repo, right? Who has committed a token? We've all done it, right? Most of us. You're right. Yeah, and no matter how senior you get, it happens, right? It happened to me a couple months ago, testing some stuff. Actually, committed my own segment API token. So, bad if you don't notice in time, like especially if it's a cloud provider key. Nowadays, OpenAI API keys also are pretty popular, so that can get pretty expensive quickly. So bad actors are using these like built-in search tools in GitHub, GitLab, running regex patterns on SourceGraph, looking through the public events API on GitHub, and this is anything new, right? Like we've seen this secret leakages. If you've talked to the Git Guardian folks, they've built whole tools around this, right? So how bad is it, right? Again, the Git Guardian has published a report in 2023 saying how leaky 2023 has been, and they state over 10 million secrets on GitHub alone have been found, and in 2021 I think it was like 6 million secrets. So it looks like it's trending upwards, right? And we're always hearing about leaked credentials leading to data breaches, right? Take it's very bright, sorry. Take Toyota, for example. In 2017, a subcontractor uploaded a portion of some source code, and that source code had a API or some token that gives them access to some database filled with customer information, right? Emails, phone numbers. And that happened in 2017, and it was up there until 2022, right? So they're unable to confirm whether this data was like downloaded access. Like Toyota doesn't know, so we don't know what was if there was any breaches or if hackers were able to leverage that data in any way. And back in 2019, there was a paper published by a North Carolina State University research team, aptly named "How Bad Can It Get?" And they found, and I quote, "consequences of even a rapidly detected secret disclosure is severe and difficult to mitigate, short of deleting a repository or reissuing credentials," right? Basically what that's saying is once a secret hits like a public repo, that API token is compromised, right? There's no other choice but to rotate it, or if you want to take more drastic measures, just delete the repo. And I hope devs aren't just adding another commit, removing this config file or removing an environment file they accidentally committed. Also, you can also attempt to rewrite history, but once you push to a Git hosting provider, people have cloned it, people have pulled it. It's not easy it's really easy to get back that rewritten history, right? And that's what we want to help our customers keep in check, right? We want to protect them in scenarios like this. We don't want unauthorized people using segment tokens, right? So I'm just gonna go back to white. So prepare your eyes. So on the agenda, we're gonna talk a little bit about segment to understand like why we wouldn't want a segment token out there. Then talk about how we address these leaked API tokens, right? Specifically on GitHub and GitLab, right? The two most popular code hosting Git providers. So, and after that, just a little bit about orphaned tokens. So, in some cases, I can create a token in an organization, and and I leave that organization. Maybe that token's still around, still usable in a long-range script no one has touched in a while. So, I'm going to sort of explain that a little bit more on the slides, and you'll learn a little bit more orphan tokens and how we handle those. So, what is Segment? You might have seen a billboard coming into SF saying Twilio. This Segment is Twilio's awesome customer data platform, and you're like, what is that? I have no idea. And if you attended Leaf Dreiser's talk on tracking meaningful security product metrics, he talked about how our team, the security features team, leverages Segment internally to sort of track usage related to the security features we build. So if someone creates a SCIM token, SCIM token, we want to know when it was created by what customer, just to get some metrics on like our business tier customers using a SCIM at all. So that would be instrumented in the sources. That's a backend server. We instrument a segment call, and that backend server is considered a source. And we want to send it to a destination. We like Snowflake. We're able to visualize metrics in that. So Snowflake is a destination. It's one of many destinations Segment offers, right? And you can manage these sources and destinations programmatic or in the UI, but we also offer a programmatic way to do it with an API token, right? What if that API token fell in the wrong hands, right? Well, theoretically, you could add a new destination, start siphoning off customer data. You could wreak some havoc, start halting your data pipeline, deleting some sources, adding your own source, and just like polluting that data pipeline. So not hard. It's not pretty easy to convince people that to build something to get those revoke those API tokens, right? So how do we do that? Luckily, we don't have to build a secret scanning solution from scratch, right? No need to scour public commits ourselves. And GitHub, GitLab offer programs. So they offer secret detection or secret scanning for GitHub, secret detection GitLab, more or less the same thing. And they can alert users when a secret is committed. If you pay a little extra to GitHub, they give you a nice little dashboard saying like, oh, these are the commits we found. Go do something about it. But they also offer partner programs for SaaS providers like ourselves or SaaS apps like ourselves to take advantage of these features, to hook into that platform and to be notified ourselves when GitHub finds a segment token. And all we have to do is two things, right? We need provide an API token, a regex pattern, and two, set up a public endpoint. Now, how does that look like? Well, at a high level, a user commits, pushes a change. The Git provider runs a list of regex patterns, and then they send matches to our endpoint. So that looks a little like this. In the request, they send us a request with the token, what type of token it is, where they found it, because not only do they look at commits, they look at pull request descriptions, issues, anywhere really there's user-generated content, they alert us on. So you send this over, and on the segment side, we can really do whatever we want here. What we do is validate the token, make sure it's actually legit, revoke the token, and then send an email out to that workspace owner or admin. And this is where you're like, if you choose to implement this is where you can differ in your implementation, right? You can really do whatever you want when you receive that exposed token. And it's one of the very first questions we asked ourselves is, do you want to warn or revoke, right? The very first option we came up with is just warn the customer. It's really easy. We can leave it up to them to take action, right? But what if they don't see that email, right? What if it happens late at night, they see it in the morning and it's too late, right? So do we just revoke the token and then notify? Well, what if they have an important workflow, right, that relies on that segment API token? Do we disrupt that? And then the third option, which I don't recommend, is we can warn them and revoke the token after 24 hours, but sort of has the downsides of the first two, where it's like, what if they don't see the email? The token's still usable after 24 hours, and we still end up revoking it. So we really wanted to decide, would we rather have our customers have a security incident where the end user data basically our customer's customer data is potentially at risk, or an incident where their script doesn't run because the API token is revoked, but the solution is just to rotate it, right? We probably want that one, right? And we also took a look at what other secret scanning partners were doing. And this is just a small sample of who's onboarded on the GitHub secret scanning partnerships. But most of them just auto revoke. Some of them are fancy, give you an option to either auto revoke or just notify. So we wanted just a first cut. Hey, let's auto revoke. And after seeing what most partners do, we felt justified in our decision to do that. So one of probably the most important aspect is, prior to joining a partner program, is the API token pattern, right? You want your API token pattern to be identifiable. You want to be able to look at it and say, yes, that's a segment token, it's a Twilio token. And one of the very first projects that I took on when joining Twilio Segment was this, on the top, that was what our tokens looked like. It was a generic 64 character string, very hard to even you're going to get a lot of false positives if you try to write a regex for that, right? You're going to get a lot of noise. So inspired by GitHub, they have a great blog post on this describing how they tweaked their API token formats. I have those links on the end of the slides. But what they did was just add a prefix to their API token. And they did something more fancy, like they added some checksum to quickly validate if a GitHub token is actually a GitHub token. But we opted with the easy solution, slap a prefix on it, SGP standing for segment public API token. And then we can easily now write a regex, right? And provide that to GitHub GitLab. So takeaway one, an easily identifiable prefix makes it easy to leverage existing tools that detect hard-coded secrets, right? Git Guardian, Git Leaks, Trufflehog, they have open source tools that you can contribute your pattern to. So there's just usually a list of regex patterns that you can now that if you have a pattern that you can easily match on, you could contribute to those open source projects. And now in the future, if your customers are leveraging any of these tools, these pre-commit Git hooks tooling, you prevent segment tokens from even or your token from even making it into their code base to begin with. So armed with a regex pattern, we went to GitHub. We're excited to partner with you. And they're like, no way, we are too. Here's a bunch of contracts that you're going to go through. And after that, we provided a launch date, and we proceeded with building the service, right, to receive these exposed tokens. And we call this the exposed Poppy token service. And again, we chose GitHub first because it's the most popular, but we are onboarding to GitLab currently as well. And I'm going to mention a lot of this is in the docs, this is in the docs because I'm going to explain some code. But GitHub provides really excellent docs to get onboarded onto this secret scanning stuff. So excellent documentation on this. And since Segment is a node shop, this exposed Poppy token service is just a simple TypeScript Express.js framework, using Express.js framework. And we just expose one single endpoint, /revoke. And yeah, once this plan was finalized, approved, it took me about a month to get this out the door. Most of it was just infra related stuff. So up here, there's pseudocode that looks a lot like JavaScript. And really what I want you to take away from this is the bulk of the business logic related to actually building this service. And some of it is segment specific stuff, but really the two most important parts are the GitHub verification middleware, basically verifying that, hey, only ensuring that GitHub is allowed to send us requests, or only listen to requests made by GitHub. And they do that, they pass in two things in the header, key identifier, key signature, and we do some, again, in the docs, we do some fancy crypto stuff to verify the signature. And if it's valid, we move on to the token verification, and we parse tokens, and then we just call our segment specific revoke, right? This is going to look different for you. Internally, we have our own token verification endpoint that we call internally. So your revoke is going to look, obviously different, vary company to company, but for the most part, again, don't really have to understand what's up there, but what we do in our revoke is we first validate if the token's actually legit. And then we do some, and then if it is, then we choose, and then we revoke it, right? Also have like a feature flag thing up there. If for ever reason, like a company wants to like, hey, Sal, stop revoking my tokens. I want to commit, I want to commit. Like we could disable it for them. So yeah, now that if you ever accidentally commit or purposely commit a segment token, you're gonna get this in your inbox, right? You're receiving this email because we revoked a public API token, and there's some metadata. We send them the exposure link, which GitHub or GitLab provides to you, so the customer can see like, oh, where was it found, and then we sort of explain a little bit about the what impact they had on their workspace. Like, okay, now that it's revoked, what can you do? And we recommend like, hey, go check your audit trail, ensure that nothing fishy happened with that API token, but I did some very unscientific tests. I committed to prod segment API tokens, and from the moment I commit and pushed to the moment I saw in the system that it was revoked, it was under 10 seconds, right? It's really, really quick, and another 30 seconds-ish for that email notification. And then just a little bit more about like why they're receiving this, and then a link to our documentation. And I told my team like, oh, like, I'd be so happy if I revoke one token within like 6 months. Like, oh, like I didn't think we'd get within the first 2 weeks we like revoked our first token, and then within the first month we revoked 3 tokens, right? So like, oh wow, people are actually committing segment tokens. Like go figure. So here's some metrics on that. This is like taken after like the first month or two of release. So I think we released like in February, and a lot of invalid stuff. Some of it is like GitHub, like sending test tokens, I think, because they always fire around the same time and are identical. So some of them are revoked. So I think those are the 3 or 4. And then some valid ones. That's messing with that feature flag I was talking about. So takeaway 2, leverage existing secret scanning partner programs to easily notify your users about leaked credentials and help prevent security incidents on your customer's behalf, right? Like, being able to just auto-revoke your token and prevent that security incident for your customer, that's a good feeling, right? And what about tokens that are not necessarily leaked, but known by users that are no longer part of your organization, right? At segment, like I said, sources, destinations, workspace is a logical grouping of them. In some applications, the API tokens are tied to the user, right? I create a token. The API token performs some actions on my behalf. And when I get offboarded, usually that API token also gets deleted as well in some cases. But at segment, it's a little different. They're tied to the workspace instead. So this gives us the advantage where it allows you to sort of add different roles and permissions to that token separate to the user. And when you create an API token, so I can create an API token, it's tied to the workspace. I leave that workspace. I technically have knowledge of an API token that can still perform actions in a workspace I'm no longer part of, right? An orphan token. So do we just auto-revoke those as well, right? Not quite, right? This is where we made the decision to alert workspace owners or admins instead, and they can decide to whether to take an action, right? It's going back to that whole warn versus revoke, right? Like in the case of the leaked token, we know it's public, it's on the internet. People are not nice on the internet, so we have to revoke it. And in the case of a orphan token, it's an ex-employee left on good terms. It's probably powering a script that you don't want to touch. And we just recommend, hey, get a nice warning, like, hey, we recommend you rotate this. The token's creator is no longer part of this workspace. And along the similar vein, we also just alert on unused tokens, right? They provide no value. They're just a liability. They're hanging around, not being used. And that usually is like if a token's last used over 3 months, we alert on that too. So we also send an email. It's kind of like the leaked API token. We also send emails out for the orphan tokens, right? Like, hey, just for your knowledge, here's an orphan token. Consider rotating it. And this is all powered by a cron job that fires once a day. It's really simple. Basically, fetch all the tokens for a workspace. If that token creator is no longer part of that workspace, we alert, right? And here's a chart of all the tokens we've marked as orphans. So happens more often than you think. And previously I mentioned not wanting to auto-delete orphan tokens. And that was a decision made during the planning of the project. And it was further reinforced when we saw a couple more metrics roll in, where we saw that 25% of orphan tokens were deleted after the first email notification, and 13 after the follow-up notification. And I think the numbers are even down more last time I checked. So if maybe we saw the opposite and our customers actually cared or were proactive about deleting orphan tokens, maybe we, and 90% of them deleted after first notification, maybe we consider auto-revoking that. But for now, we felt justified in our decision. So takeaway 3, consider notifying users when a tokens creator is no longer part of an organization or company, right? The list of SaaS apps with GitHub, partnering with GitHub, GitLab is growing, and I really haven't come across another company that notifies me about orphan tokens if they have that concept. So that'd be pretty cool to see, right? And at the end of the day, we hope, I know that these two features, if you look at the metrics, are keeping our users' tokens safe, right? And preventing at least pretty devastating security incidents. And we're sort of able to strike, considering that balance between user experience and security, right? In terms of, a publicly exposed token, just auto-revoking as opposed to just notifying an orphan token where we can minimize potential disruptions there. So takeaway 1, again, if there's nothing else you're going to take away from this talk, please have an identifiable prefix so I can know what, you can easily just leverage those Git pre-commit hooks. And being able to prevent them from being committed, and also being able to onboard easily to these partnerships that GitHub and GitLab offer. 2, leverage existing, just consider onboarding, right, to these partner programs. They're very friendly. The GitHub, GitLab folks are really easy to work with. So, and just help prevent security, your tokens from preventing your customers from committing API tokens and having security incidents when they do accidentally commit one of your tokens. And just consider notifying about orphan tokens, right? That'd be awesome to see. And I have a companion blog post, much more detail about just how we added that prefix. So if you want to learn more, you could check out the blog. And of course, you could DM me if you have any questions. Check out my website. All the slides are up there. Shout out to the security features team, Leaf for mentoring me through this process, and all of you folks for showing up. So thank you.
Thank you, Sal. Just on behalf of BSidesSF and our gift sponsor, Doyensec, we would like to thank you for being here today and present you with this small gift. And as we have woo, is there, I have 2 minutes. Is there any questions here? Let me run around here.
Hi. Segment must have a bunch of customers who still have 64-character random API keys. How did you handle the transition or trying to migrate people off the old API keys?
Yeah, so the question was, or it was the mic. So question was, how do we migrate people off V1, right? That's a good question, right? We're lucky enough that we have 2 versions of the API. So we have the config API and public API. So we're lucky enough that we're actually deprecating the config API, and we're sort of pushing people to the public API. So naturally through that process, that's how we tackle that. But yeah, you're right. There might be some old V1 tokens out there that we just aren't getting, right? Because we just can't pick up on those. We just don't have regex patterns for that, right? So unfortunately, there are V1, but we are pushing people to the new public API. So naturally, they'll get that new V2 token that we call internally. So
we have about 60 seconds for this last question, and then we could take the rest in the lobby.
Hi. So I actually am also going through the token scanning like partner programs pretty shortly here, I think in the next like couple weeks. But I was also interested, one thing I've been kind of pushing for at my office was like protecting the API keys in storage, because a lot of places, like they're like, oh, hash passwords, and then, oh, but like just store this bearer token in plain text and log it everywhere, like on accident, you know. Do you take anything like, do you hash like API keys internally, or like do you have any insight into like how do you protect it from like a Segment employee pretending to be a customer?
Sure. Yeah, great question. How do we store API tokens, right? Is pretty much the gist of the question. And I believe they are hashed, I believe they're by and we identify them by prefix. So we do have an identifier. So our ID field is basically like the first 6 characters of that token. And we do hash the tokens as well, so. Yes. Leaf, do you have anything to add to that question? Or they're pretty much hashed, right?
Yeah, you can use something that's like not as crazy of a hashing algorithm. You can guarantee that it's you can use something that's not as crazy of a hashing algorithm as what you would do for user passwords, because you're guaranteed that the string is strong, and you don't want it to be super slow, because if somebody's making like, you know, I don't even know what a reasonable number is, maybe like 50 API requests in like a minute or like in 30 seconds, you don't want to like run through bcrypt on all those. Yeah, I think we might have done 512, but I can't remember and I don't work there anymore.